The regular July 16th meeting of the Palm Springs Sustainability Commission is called to order. Dan, would you do the roll call, please?
Chair Clark,
Present.
Vice Chair McCann,
Present.
Commissioner Baker,
Here.
Commissioner Friedman,
Here.
Commissioner
Here.
Futterman,
Present.
Commissioner Garrett,
Present.
Commissioner Gothier,
Here.
Commissioner Miller,
Here.
Commissioners Flanagan, Santora, and Goins are excused. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Dan. The next item on the agenda is the acceptance of the agenda. It was emailed and posted last Thursday, July 11th, per city policy. Is there a motion to accept the agenda?
I move that we accept the agenda.
Commissioner Miller, a second.
Second.
Co-Chair McCann. Any discussion on the agenda? All in favor of accepting the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
Abstain.
And one abstention. Okay. Agenda accepted. Now we'll go into the city manager and staff comments. Do you want to start, Patrick?
Sure, and Anthony and Terry will be along for the Brown Act refresher in a moment. But first, why don't we go ahead, Stacy, if you want to say your few words about the cogen plant. We can start with that. So you guys had requested a little update on the cogen plant, and so Stacy's here to provide that, so, to the extent that she is able to.
Forgot the green light. Hi, my name is Stacy Schaefer. I'm the Director of Maintenance and Facilities here at the city, in charge of facilities maintenance, which obviously oversees cogen. Cogen is currently down. We are waiting on a part, but we actually have been up the better part of off and on for the last 4 months. We've seen some really good performance and some starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel with some of our recuperation of some of our electrical costs. We are moving forward with NG, who are our partners in this endeavor, and hopefully soon we will come to some terms and agreements on how to move forward with this and get more and more and more of our energy savings. Oh, NG, formerly Optera, formerly Chevron. So the project started with Chevron, then they became Optera, and now they are NG International, I believe. Any questions?
Any questions for Stacy?
And a quick question. So I know a lot of that energy goes to the airport.
All of it?
All of it does. Okay. So none of it gets anywhere else to any of the other city facilities.
The airport consumes that and could consume considerably more.
Okay.
That is actually obviously, they're 24-hour operation, but 20 hours, they're up and running live and they consume a considerable amount. So, yeah, that's the best place to be putting that.
Great.
Thank you, Stacy.
All right. So one of the things I wanted to mention today is I did do a little update to our product development process, product workflow. And so we passed out a hard copy of that. And so I added 2 sections. One is to the end of the document. So one is at the bottom of the second page, which is programs that are recommended by the commission. So one of the things that Roy had mentioned when we talked about this earlier was that we didn't really have a placeholder for programs that are developed, not necessarily products. So I tried to describe in a little bit more detail here about what happens when we have programs that get put into place, usually as a result of suggestions from the committees or subcommittees or the city council. So again, you guys bring up ideas. You guys do a little research into them. You guys often figure out what are the key parameters of that program and examples from other cities. And so then we take that information and figure out what to do with that in terms of, it usually comes to the full commission, has some sort of recommendation, and then it gets, could potentially go to council if it needs to go to council, but often it comes to city staff to figure out what to do with that and how to implement it. A good example was the battery recycling program, where you guys kind of defined the parameters of what that should look like, identified some funding sources, and then we went forward and kind of created that program based on that guideline and got that guidance. So that's the one thing I added. And then the second thing I added was projects or programs that emerge from outside the city. And one of the things that inspired this was the recent grant that we received through the Southern California Association of Governments to do the walkability master plan and safe routes to school plan. So we got a chunk of funding. They are sort of managing that process for us, and we helped define the scope of that project, worked with the committee to do that, and then that project will basically proceed, and this group will act as advisory group and provide input to that process along the way. So that I tried to outline that in here as well. So I think those are the key kind of workflows that come through the committee and the commissions and the commission. And so anyway, so I just wanted to get those things thrown in there. So if you've got any questions, comments about that, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to make some edits to it down the road. And Sandra, just for your information, when I started, I didn't quite understand how things worked, and so this was one of the documents that I tried to pull together to help inform myself, but also to inform others as well. We have another one on the agenda development process too that we'll get to you as well. So, all right, yes,
This looks like it's,
microphone.
this looks like it's kind of a this last project
Yeah.
for programs. It looks more of like a unidirectional kind of a thing, that it's coming from the city to the commissioners, is that correct?
So
In other
this
words,
could come
Can it
about.
not come the other way around?
Yeah, so it could come about in a couple of different ways. The intent with this one was for things that come from outside, that are either given to us or somehow we get a grant from somebody from outside to do something. And so that's sort of what it was designed to do. So that's more outward facing or outward coming things. So.
Is there another place where there's a statement made where there can be a reciprocal sort of a situation where a commission member could suggest working with, say, CVAG on something?
So I
Or
think that
Riverside
would come
County
in,
or
I think that would come in under the other
Another
workflows.
category.
So again, all the stuff that comes through the committees or the commission would sort of fall into one of those other categories, I think. And either end up as a program, a product, or whatever it may be, is my feeling.
But as Patrick said, if anybody has any comments on the process, on the document, please,
Yeah.
let him know.
Yeah, if you see anything else that's missing, feel free to just let me know and we'll figure it out. Okay.
Anthony's here.
Okay, cool. Great. Hi. All right, so why don't we turn it over to Anthony, and he can do our little Brown Act refresher. And I know that I've certainly talked or learned about the Brown Act, but it will certainly be good to hear it from Anthony to just make sure that we're all on the same page about what the requirements are, et cetera. So,
Well, I'm sure Mr. Friedman can give you a much more in-depth session than I could. But I'll just start off with saying I'm passing around the ABCs of the Brown Act. This was developed by the Institute of Local Governments through the League of California Cities. It's just a brief overview of the Brown Act. I'll go over a couple of things, but I certainly want to just primarily get to any questions you may have. Some of the things I wanted to make sure everybody knows is for a regular meeting, the agenda needs to be posted at least 72 hours in advance. For special meetings, 24 hours in advance. When documents are being released to a majority of the commission, they also need to be available to the public. So we want to make sure that commissions are getting documents that are submitted as your packet are also available to the public through the website or at the office. And in addition, any documents that are received after the posting of the agenda should also be available to the public. Those don't need to necessarily be posted onto the website. But if somebody wanted to see any additional correspondence that has been received leading up to the meeting, they should be able to check in with the staff. When it comes to serial meetings, we want to make sure that since this group has so many subcommittees or works in subcommittees, that you understand that when you've got, how many members is this board? 11. So when you have your subcommittees that are meeting the maximum number of members, which is 5, once you hit that number, you want to make sure that you're avoiding speaking to anybody else who's not on the subcommittee regarding the business of that subcommittee. That would be a violation that'd be considered a serial meeting because now you're bringing in one more member, which would constitute a majority of the board. Even if you're providing an update, you're giving them information that's not privy to the full board. And that would be through phone calls, emails, or even meeting in a coffee shop and having that kind of discussion.
So Anthony,
Yeah.
how does that apply to the committee level as opposed to the commission level? Because most of our committees are 2 or 3 people, so that's not usually a problem. But it's the committees I wasn't quite sure about. So if a committee meets and there are 3 people in the committee, and if 2 of them have a conversation either inside or outside or wherever at the coffee shop,
Sure.
is that an issue or?
It is if it's a standing committee. So for instance, if the committee, like if you guys establish a standing committee where you have ongoing jurisdiction with no sunset timeline, now that is a Brown Act body as well. And so you're going to want to make sure that you're avoiding any kind of serial meetings. If it's a subcommittee that's ad hoc, so you have a limited duration and very specific subject matter, those are not subject to Brown Acts, so you don't need to post agendas for those. And the public does not necessarily need to be invited, although you can invite them, just like you may see the city council members sometimes do town hall forums and things like that. Those are non-agendized meetings, but the public is still invited. In those cases, you still want to make sure that you're avoiding hitting a majority of the commissioners discussing that subject matter. But if it's less than a quorum, so you've got 3 members on that subcommittee and they want to talk to a 4th member, that would be okay. Again, you just want to make sure nobody's doing a daisy chain of communications where it's passing along from one commissioner to another, because again, we need to avoid those Brown Act issues.
Dave?
Thank you, because this is the issue that I want to raise. Just the way the Brown Act defines legislative body, there is no difference between the commission as a whole and a standing committee. All of the Brown Act stuff applies equally to both. A standing committee, of which there are 2 now and perhaps a 3rd by the time we're done this evening, is a full Brown Act body. And so, as you all know, I've been fairly clear about, in terms of our standing committee, to make sure that all of our materials are fully Brown Acted with documents, agendas, essentially minutes, report that constitutes minutes. So I think that's the appropriate way sort of to look at it. If we're standing committee, full Brown Act, and as Mr. Mejia just mentioned, if it's an ad hoc subcommittee for small, duration, six-month projects, those are not subject to the Brown Act, but of course everything voluntarily can be open for the public.
And then when it comes to public comment, I also want to point out that if you are using speaker cards, you need to make sure that people are aware that they can fill those out anonymously. There's no requirement that anybody identify themselves. You can, of course, adopt time limitations on public comment, so 2-3 minutes, whatever your choice is. And then when it comes to dissension, the public has a right to voice its opinions, even if it's criticism of staff or the commission or the city council. And so unless the person is using vulgar and obscene language or speaking out of turn, so their public comment period is over, and if they continue to shout, then you can adjourn the meeting or take a recess to calm the situation. But criticism alone is not a reason to have somebody stop speaking. But happy to take any questions. Those were kind of the main points I wanted to hit.
I do have a question. I'm a little confused, I guess. On a subcommittee of 2 or 3 people, when they're not in a meeting, are they allowed, those 2 or 3 commissioners, are they allowed to communicate with each other?
So if it's a standing committee,
Standing.
then they should not be talking to each other outside of the standing meeting, discussing subject matter that is applicable to that subcommittee.
Even with-
So if, let's say
even
you have a
emails?
styrofoam standing committee, they should not be communicating with each other about subject matter that that subcommittee could be speaking about. And whether it's by phone, email, in person, if those are the subcommittee members, they shouldn't be speaking to each other about that subject matter outside of a meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess, I think you probably have the same.
Yeah, the wording I'm reading is majority should not be meeting outside, but a minority of a standing subcommittee can meet outside.
But if the subcommittee's 2 or 3 members, then you have a very small, if it's 2 members, you can't speak to each other, but if it's a standing committee. And if you got 3, then talking to 1
Would be acceptable.
would be a majority.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So when you're looking at the
Yes.
city council of 5, only 2 members can speak to each other about a particular topic outside of the meeting. Once they get to a third, you've hit a quorum.
It's not fun, and as Patrick knows, because I've had to raise this issue several times, it clearly does limit what you can do and say, which is essentially, so we, and I'm sure you do the same thing there, we discuss everything at the meeting, and outside of the meeting, I draft essentially minutes and ask what I think is as close as possible is please let me know that you agree with the minutes. And if there's anything substantive, I defer that to Patrick to sort of deal with. And even that's potentially a serial meeting, so I'm somewhat careful about that. But we have to do some things with a 3-member committee, which is at least the 2 that exist so far. It is exactly the same thing as a full commission. Not easy to deal with, but that's what the Brown Act says. So we just have to sort of deal with it, and rely on Patrick to perhaps do any final decisions, because staff can do things. Can't necessarily talk to each other completely and do a spug and hope and this is it who
Hub and spoke?
Hub and spoke, yeah. Even that's a little challenging, and that could be potentially a serial meeting. So it is not practical, but most laws are not practical. We just have to deal with it.
And as you may have seen, the city council has that challenge where they have it on their agenda, the council member communications is specifically so that they can share ideas and issues that have arisen over the last couple of weeks at each meeting, because the council members can't do that outside of the meeting.
I have one question about that. Our waste reduction subcommittee has 3 members. And one activity that we did recently was to do an inspection of trash and recycling containers downtown. And 2 of the members of the subcommittee participated, and 2 city staff members participated. Should we not have done that?
It should have been agendized, and the public should have been invited. And what you would do is you don't have to bust them around, but you have to identify the locations that you're going to meet at and at what time, and allow the public to be available, to be present.
Okay, thank you.
If it's a standing subcommittee.
It is.
It's about the same committee. We've got we have actually many projects that we're working on. And so the way it's been laid out to me is that we go to the meetings to discuss issues, but we're also, we're brainstorming to a certain extent, but there's a limited amount of time. So it pretty much has to be a done deal when we go there. So when do we brainstorm? When do we talk it over? You know what I mean? We're working on problems together. I don't know when we're doing that.
Well, you have to do it, if it's a standing committee, you're going to have to do it in public forum. So whether you want to call it a study session, a town hall meeting, just a discussion item, whatever it may be, if it's subject to the Brown Act, you're going to need to do it in a public forum.
What if it's not called a standing committee?
If it's an ad hoc committee, then it needs to be limited jurisdiction and limited duration. So you cannot be ongoing. So if it's a waste reduction subcommittee that you think is going to go on for the next 5 years, that would not qualify. It needs to be something that's less than a year, and even that's kind of stretching it.
And we've been good about identifying the scope of ad hoc committees.
One sort of question, observation, but I think I know the answer to it. We discussed, it's in the reported that we have met, I guess it was last month, with a representative of the cannabis industry, and she suggested a field trip because one of our projects, which we'll be working on, is essentially sustainability considerations for our growing cannabis industry. The council clearly is supported, but there are some sustainability issues. I think that if we do that, it is exactly what you just said, and all the commissioners would be invited. That essentially says that needs to be notified, saying, the members of the Sustainability Commission are invited to go to X, grow facility, and that's officially notified as agendized as a special meeting of the Sustainability Commission, and members of the public are invited.
Yes.
I believe that's the appropriate. We've done that a couple of times where we've gone to like the Murph facilities and the anaerobic. Maybe we haven't been, 6. Maybe we've only been 5 at that. But I think that, because I know we've been talking about that field trip, if it happens, it needs to be agendized as a special meeting of the commission, if all the members are invited.
And alternatively, and this is only if there's logistically issues, you could split the group, because it's just information gathering. It's not intended to be a place where you're making a decision. You could split the group up so that it's 3, 4, and 4, and do the field trip. And then you don't have to agendize it, because you're just doing an informational session where you're getting information, then coming back to a public forum to have the discussion about the issue. But again, you can't have a quorum within that in any of the trips.
That may be more than the folks want to, that puts a
Right.
burden
Of
to
course.
basically make them do their spiel 3 times.
Yes.
So maybe with all due respect to our busy staff, if they wouldn't mind, if we get there, that it would just be agendized as a special meeting of the commission. And I'm happy to work on that when we get there.
Okay,
Another question?
great.
Yeah, I do have another question. We've always said if one commissioner wants to get something to the rest of the commissioners, that it should go through staff first. So same with the subcommittee then, if there's a question or a comment that one commissioner wants to make regarding the subcommittee, can that commissioner send it to staff and staff send it to the other commissioner without violating anything?
Information sharing is fine. Decision-making, opinion sharing is not. So if a commissioner is providing their opinion on a subject matter and then sharing that amongst the other commissioners, that could be a potential Brown Act violation. If you're saying, I've downloaded this great white paper on this issue, please share it with the other commissioners, that's acceptable. But again, when that item comes to the agenda, you're going to want to make sure that that information is, one, in the packet and provided to the community.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I have 2 questions. In terms of a standing committee, are there restrictions or requirements on meeting venue or location?
Meeting locations need to be within the city's jurisdiction. So venue, it could be it could be any place, just like if it was a field trip. It could be any place as long as it's within the city's jurisdiction. And if it is a field trip, it can be outside of the city's jurisdiction. Again, it just needs to be noticed appropriately.
So
But the
it-
decisions shouldn't be made off-site.
So the meeting could be held in a committee member's home if they were willing to open it to the public?
It could be. Sure, yeah.
Okay.
I have seen commissions, a finance commission meet at a person's business. That was not a city facility, as long as it's available to the public. It's noticed appropriately. It's not recommended that it be at somebody's house, but could it be? Yes.
And then going to Commissioner Miller's earlier comment about project work within a standing committee, can a standing committee appoint an ad hoc committee, or does that have to come back to the commission to be appointed by the chair? If there's just a short-term project that the Waste Reduction Committee wanted to work on that's going to go for a half a year?
I don't know the exact answer. My suggestion would be that ad hoc subcommittee should be appointed by the full commission,
Okay.
not a subcommittee creating a subcommittee.
All right. Great. One more.
Just one more question. What are the penalties for volunteers who sit in a commission for violating the Hatch Act?
So the penalties are typically towards the city. So any of the projects or recommendations, the ordinance that may get approved by the commission and then sent on to the city council for adoption, that project is essentially tainted. And so the city council would have a couple of remedies depending on what the issue is. One would be to reintroduce the ordinance and readopt the ordinance in a public forum, or send it back to the commission for it to reconsider its decision in a public forum. That's the first level of remedy. Second level and third level would be misdemeanor and civil fines.
Okay. Was your question about the Hatch Act or the Brown Act?
Excuse me, that came from the federal government.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Brown
Okay.
Act. Brown Act, correction.
But usually it's a reconsideration of the item. It's the remedy.
All right. Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. The last thing I wanted to mention, a couple things I wanted to mention, is just a recap of some of the council meetings. So on June 19th, our new commissioner was appointed. There was also the Salton Sea resolution that was passed to approve long-term water intake, I guess, to the sea, or study of that. And then the scooters issue was discussed. It was voted down, but bicycles were added to the list of things to think about. So that was delegated to the Business Retention Subcommittee. And then the plastics ban was fully supported, and so we'll be pursuing and figuring that out. July 10th, there was a request from City Council to evaluate non-toxic alternatives to Roundup for city gardening and landscaping activities. So I bring that to the commission to figure out how you want to respond to that council's request. And then the July 24th meeting, which is the one coming up, there will be the solar zoning ordinance that goes before the commission and before the council, and so we'll be there to provide support to the planning department on that presentation. So I think that's it as far as the council meetings go. And then the only other couple of things I will mention, one is the summer reading program bike raffle on July 18th. And Dan has a very important picture to show if it will come up. So at that, we donated funds to supply or to give away three bicycles and helmets. And so those will be given away the afternoon of the event. And again, that's Thursday afternoon, I think at 4 o'clock.
4:15?
4:15? All right. Well, there'll be cupcakes and cake. So, yes. It's much more impactful in the picture, but
It won't come up.
all right. Well, hopefully the others will. All right, and then the only other request that I have is I just want to do a quick go around the room to check in on your email addresses. And so I know a few of you have gotten back to us as far as which email address you would like to use going forward, your new city email address or to continue your personal email address. So I just wanted to do a double check on which email address you would like for us to be using going forward. Sandra, I know that you're going to retain your personal one. Okay. Do you want to use your new city one or? Okay. All right. Okay.
City.
Okay.
city, but we've been using both.
Right, for fast things, I've been using both.
I haven't
yeah.
set up the city one yet
Okay,
either.
all right. Are you interested in using it, though?
I don't, I wasn't here last.
Oh,
month,
okay.
so Possibly.
All right, so you'll check it out and let us know.
City, and also for things that I may need a quick response for, I'll CC myself just because I don't seem to be able to get the city one up on my phone.
Okay, all right, good.
In that case, then personal, because I can't get on my phone. It's-
Okay, all right, so you'll stick with personal.
I'd like to be on the city one, but I wasn't able to do it yet. So until I am firmly on it, I'd like to use my own.
Okay, all right, so we'll keep about half of you on the old one until you let us know otherwise. Okay, all right, super. And then I think that's all that I had on the city manager front.
I'd just like to add something about the bicycle giveaway.
Yep.
I've gone the last 3 years, and I think it's a really fun event. There are a lot of kids there with their parents, and the commissioners who are there get to pull raffle tickets out of a drum and announce the winner. So that's a lot of fun too. So I would encourage any of you who have the time to go. And I think as long as we don't talk about anything related to the commission, it's okay. Okay. So now we'll move on to public comments. This time is for members of the public to address the Sustainability Commission on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission. The commission values your comments, but pursuant to the Brown Act, cannot take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes are assigned for each speaker. Does anyone here have public comment this evening? Guess the answer is no. Okay. Now we'll move on to welcome and introductions. I think most of you have said hello to Sandra Garrett, our newest commission member so far, but I'd just like to take this time to formally welcome her to the commission and ask her to say a little bit about herself and what she's interested in as far as the commission goes.
I'm very, very happy to be here. It was quite exciting when I got the phone call. It had that tone of, this is good news. So I'm, excuse me, I'm an apparel designer with commercial retail background. In '92, I went totally green with my textiles and that, and my fixtures. Everything was made in USA, and everything was green. So 1992 was the first time that was really viable in terms of large-scale textile production. So 92, I changed everything. It did, in fact, hurt my business initially, but it was the right thing to do, and I'm glad I did it. So it's been a long process and coming a long way from the original reduce, reuse, recycle, which is still core, I think, to everything. But in my business, which in fashion and apparel and food packaging as well, because food and fashion were kind of two yarns that have run through my careers together, and they're very similar. But both of them have become extremely prepackaged in small amounts. So that, to me, became a problem, not only because it was inconsistent with my image and what I was trying to promote, but the end result is, you look around now, anywhere in the world, the microplastics and all of that, it's on a shocking level. And even in terms of geology, we are we have the Pleistocene and the Jurassic and all that. We are actually already in the age of plastics, which is really kind of scary to think that all of our bodies and all of the wildlife and fish, that they're microscopic pieces of plastic in all of the tissue in their bodies. So this is really, really extreme. What can I do as, with the power of one, in community, commercially and civically? How can we not only reduce this and make use of what we're stuck with, which are mountains and mountains of small particle trash? Much of it cannot be successfully recycled into other products, and there's only so many plastic items that you really do need. So here, And I live downtown and I walk. I got rid of my car when I moved to Palm Springs because I was having to commute into LA, which was a horrible experience. And coming from New York, which is one of the top green cities, even though it's Gotham, it is very green, and public transportation is a big part of that. So I'm a big supporter and believer in public transportation. I love the buses here, the hydrocell buses. They're wonderful. I just wish the buses were a little bit more frequent to make it a little bit, to encourage more people to use them. So all of that being said, what I notice, and I live downtown in just off the movie colony, right in the Uptown Design District. I walk my dogs, I'm constantly in my neighborhoods, and the amount of plastic is pretty shocking. You're looking at vacant lots sometime, well, there might be some tumbleweeds and bits of paper that you would see in the past, but all of that would degrade. Now, it's all plastic, 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 and I see the same plastic sitting there for months. I have a neighbor who goes every morning, he's a retired school teacher, and he picks up a bag of recyclables every morning when he does his constitution about 5:30 in the morning. We had more people like that, but how do we first gather and contain all of this junk? Because it's not too bad to look at an empty lot or a pristine desert, but it's the garbage, and it isn't paper trash or food trash, it's plastic. So I think this is a major, major problem. And as a town of hospitality, as well as healing with a lot of medical and, a lot of people come here for, traditionally for healing. How do we complement that image and sustain that without contradicting in the reality with garbage? And, without even, getting into issues of homelessness and so on. But just the garbage alone on the street and as a retailer, it's bad for business and it isn't good for anybody. So I think being able to work with the hospitality people, the hotels, the restaurants, the cafes, the takeout people, how do we encourage them and make it possible for them to change over in packaging. Something I've had to do in my own business. I know it's costly, and I know that but compared to what? The costs are going to be there one way or another. And, I think this is something that we do have to approach sooner rather than later. And I don't think there is a later on it. And the other thing I've noticed just recently, and in fact, one of the city council meetings some time ago, where they were talking about the non-smoking at the Village Fest. Village Fest is wonderful, and it's great that people come out for it. But they said, well, just go down the side streets and you can smoke there. Well, I live on those side streets, and it's obnoxious because they throw their cigarette butts now. Well, know that the cigarette butts don't degrade. They last for a really long time. So that's a problem. It gets into the water systems. They have to be removed and so on. So, even something as silly as maybe encouraging people to go back to the old glamour Hollywood days of cigarette holders and getting rid of the filters, that's a problem. And the other recent garbage problem I've noticed downtown is all the plastic that's coming from the cannabis pharmacies. And I don't know if you've been in them recently, but it is no longer jars of flour with bud tenders. Everything is prepackaged and small packages, lots of plastic, metallicized plastic, and materials that are, I think, very inconsistent with the 420 movement. So why are they wrapped in that kind of packaging? Because that packaging is ending up on the streets now, and I'm seeing it every day when I walk out my door. So those are some things that I think would be a good start and something that I'm quite interested in because, as you know, there's a lot of propaganda. Oh, it's very expensive to be green and all that. It isn't. It's actually cheaper and it's better. And you get a return in your business because there's a feel-good factor to it. And if they have a choice, I'll go to the store that is green. So it's not going to change how we do anything. It's just going to be, the paper cup instead of the plastic cup. The issues of straws, they're all solvable and it all exists already and it's affordable. So how do we encourage those businesses to make those decisions, I don't know if there's perks or whatever we could do to help them hurry up and change over. Because getting rid of the plastic bags was big. There's still some inventory in the city that there's still, in some of the small delis and that. But that'll eventually go away, and as people get in the habit, like they do in Europe or in large cities, of carrying a little bag with you, so if you run into a shop, you don't have to come out. But it's the small plastics and all of the food packaging that I'm seeing, and it just sits there. It just sits there. So my background was really about showing people it's better, but letting them make that choice and giving them those choices. The decision is an obvious one once you're educated. So there's nobody coming over and hitting you over the head and you're bad. You're not. You're just, you can do it in a better way. And I think that if you take that friendly approach with people, and I know in my own businesses, it became more of an educational sharing rather than this is better and you must do it this way. And you're wrong, and you can't make people wrong. You have to encourage them to come along in a new and better direction. So those are my big personal concerns and what I would like to kind of focus on.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing your concerns, and I think there's a lot of work that we can do. And welcome again.
Thank you.
Now we're moving on to the presentations. We have 2 scheduled for this evening. The first one is on fountain grass eradication, and that's Jennifer Prado. And thanks to Commissioner Futterman for arranging this.
Hello there. This is Tracy Merrigan. She's kind of a partner and member of a coalition on weeds. My name is Jennifer Prado. I'm with Friends of the Desert Mountains, and for the past 7 years, I've been working with that nonprofit to help eradicate all sorts of invasive species throughout the Coachella Valley. So I'll keep my comments brief. Basically, fountain grass is one of our worst invasive weeds. Do I just click this? How do I? Okay. Just basics, what makes a plant invasive. Plants are invasive when they're both non-native and capable of causing some type of harm, whether it's environmental, economic, or human. And, the harms, the greatest harms that we face here in the Coachella Valley is, we're a desert ecosystem. We are not set up for wildfires. Unfortunately, with what you're seeing on the screen, those photos and those canyons and, what you see, behind us on the, all of the hillsides of the San Jacintos and Santa Rosa Mountains going all the way down, and on the other side of the valley, it's filling up with this invasive grass. And it's not just this one, but there are others, but this one is really bad because it gets huge. It gets to be, sometimes one plant can be 6 feet across and, taller than I am. So it's a real problem. And as you can see, this should be pristine, open desert wash, and it's filled with this invasive grass, which was planted as an ornamental somewhere. Another harm is water. It takes up scarce water resources in the desert. So it's not only taking surface water from rivers and, tinajas and ponds, wherever we have them in natural areas, but it's also keeping that surface water from percolating down into our groundwater. So, where we have to worry about water scarcity, this is compounding the problem. The other biggie that is pretty much a problem all over the world with invasive species is loss of biodiversity. Where you have invasives of any sort that take over. And you can see kind of up here on where the grass is growing out of the rock, it can start as small as that, in a seed in the crack of a rock that escaped and blew into there and got a little bit of water, a little bit of moisture, then becomes a plant, then becomes a colony kind of down there in the left bottom corner, and then on the right it covers the whole area. So it's a very fast-growing, fast-spreading weed. This is kind of just a recap. It's very drought tolerant and it is fire adapted. So if there were to be a fire, the first thing to come back would be the fountain grass. So unfortunately, if you'd think, let's burn it out or whatever, do a prescribed burn. Not unless you're very careful about restoring that habitat afterward. Again, just spreads from urban landscapes. This is Indian Canyons, up all the way up on top of the rocks, and you can see it if you've been on the Palm Springs aerial tramway, which I was last weekend. It goes all the way up. I mean, it's all of that kind of golden colored stuff on the hillsides is invasive fountain grass. And this is the North Licking Trail. It's hard to see, but all of that brownish stuff is fountain grass.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
When was it introduced here, and how long has it taken to get to where it is today?
It's. I don't know when it was initially introduced. It's been around for a very long time. Tracy, do you have any idea?
I think, grasses became so big kind of like in the 90s. In 2000, so we're a desert. We're not like Maine or Massachusetts where things will die back. We don't have a winter, so that also is an issue with these plants. And like pampas grass in LA and this grass and fountain grass in LA also, but
there's people.
It escapes your yard very quickly.
Yeah, the people in Canada
used,
say that it's an annual in their yard. It dies in the winter when it snows. So, but not here.
And cities use it. It's a cheap plant, right? So, a lot of commercial designers have used a lot of these grasses that are now invasive, like Mexican feathergrass and these grasses, because they give you a lot of bang for your buck. And they're very, very inexpensive for growers to grow. So there's a huge markup on them, and they're like a cheap plant to buy. Like everyone wants grass and meadows and things like that. There was like a whole design time for this, and which has kind of passed in a way, right?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, and but this is the effects of that.
Yeah. So what I've done over the past seven years is, get out in the field with volunteers and sometimes hired crews, and there's a specific way that we have to remove it. And we've had success doing that. It's very labor intensive, and when you get up into very rocky areas where you can't get it out by the root, that's kind of another situation. But where you are able to dig it out, you remove the seed heads, bag those, make sure they're not escaping, dig out the plant, and then you'll find masses and masses of, thousands and thousands of seeds at the base of the plant. Collect as much of that as you can, bag it up, and dispose of that properly. And then you have to go back and monitor and make sure that it doesn't come back.
What would be proper disposal of those seeds?
The best thing to do would be to solarize it in a black bag for a series of weeks probably, and then you can put it into your compost bin. Yeah, and the rest of the biomass of the plant can go straight into the compost bin. There are plenty of landscape alternatives. This is just two of them that are quite pretty, so it's not like there aren't other things that have the same kind of effect in your yard. There are other invasives. We have Stipa capensis. Another portion of that golden glow that you're seeing on your mountainsides is this grass. It's the Stipa capensis, this brown stuff. And that is slowly creeping its way from, Palm Springs now it's been in Cathedral City and Palm Springs for a while, and now it's hitting Ranch Mirage, and it's creeping eastward, and I've seen it as far east as way down south by Salton Sea. So
And that's not a nursery plant.
No, that one isn't. So the fountain grass, the good thing about it is because it's a nursery plant, we can actually do something about it. And, as the Sustainability Commission, you can make recommendations to the city council about things that can be done by the city to help eradicate it. There are, manual removal techniques which we do often, and those are successful but labor intensive. But what we're trying to get back to is this kind of wild, beauty that we have in the springtime when there aren't invasive grasses completely taking over. So I have a list of some of the things that I thought the Planning Commission could perhaps recommend to the city, if you're interested in hearing that, or I can take questions.
Are there any questions?
Have you talked to the folks up at Joshua Tree? They have a program up there where they're getting rid of invasive grasses in exactly the way that you're talking about. And they even go in the summer.
It's
brutal.
I have worked with the folks at Joshua Tree, and unfortunately, the way that Joshua Tree operates now with their veg program is they have, in a lot of places we have sensitive cultural resources, and especially in Joshua Tree, they don't allow any type of digging or pulling of the plants. They can only clip, and that's not effective control for things like fountain grass, which resprout very easily. So it's a huge issue for the park, especially because they don't have the same options that we have in other areas. So they can't just dig it out, unfortunately. And that goes for any of their invasive plants. So, yeah.
We have a group in the desert that Jen is one of the leaders of that highlights this issue, and Jen has done amazing work getting friends and the public involved in doing weed management. But if you look at Palm Springs, it's not an idea that you can think of as because we've been doing outreach to the public for I don't know how many years now. So we outreach with Desert Horticultural and friends. So we did this flyer together to start doing an outreach to the public a number of years ago. We finally we're at the end of them and going to redo it. But we hand these out at the farmers markets. We hand these out at all of Desert Horticultural events and other outreach partners like up at Whitewater Preserve and Thousand Palms Oasis. Like lots of our kind of community partners hand this out also. But part of the problem in Palm Springs, it's city land where there's so much fountain grass. So you can think of doing a project based on the public, but you might want to do a project showing how the city is a leader in removal and then engage the public. Because if you go to Tockwitz Wash, if you just drive down in Tockwitz River Estates, that wash is completely full of fountain grass. There's fountain grass in the sidewalks. There's fountain grass in the medians. There's fountain grass in the middle of deer grass, which is a beautiful native substitute. And then if you drive down Gene Autry, you'll see fountain grass sprouting in the middle of it. So it would be really great to have the city, to have you guys think of having a city program where you use your own staff that can be trained on fountain grass removal. And if someone, I know Tockwitz River Estates, when I used to live there, had their whatchamacallit, boat something?
Yacht Club.
Yacht Club.
Tockwitz River Yacht Club. Great group. That's what they call it, great group.
Yeah, and so like every twice a year or something like that, we had these cleanups of the wash. If you started with something that you really promoted with PS1 and showed people, if you went and pulled the fountain grass in that area, it would just be an amazing difference. You just see it visually like crazy. or around the all along the tram road, or a lot of fountain grass has gone into that development right across from the visitor center that was never built, and it looked like they had irrigation in there for a really long time, and they had beautiful plants, but now that's getting completely full of fountain grass. So if you could pick some places where people really hike and that are on a busy street, or, and you really show how you get rid of it, it would be great, because tons of it is on city property. Tons and tons and tons of it.
Question and clarification. Is that because the city has been in the past or is now a leader in planting it, or has it moved on to city land from people's own homes and that sort of thing?
It's probably both.
So you're not sure if the city's
I'm not
planting?
sure. Do you know, Tracy?
Well, the deer grass, it's just, the seed just disperses. It's a very windy place. So we're in a desert, and wind disperses everything.
You mean fountain grass?
Yeah.
You said deer grass.
Oh, but you find it in clumps of fountain grass. Obviously, the seed popped in there, and it wasn't planted with the deer grass intentionally. But people were planting a ton of fountain grass at one point. You'd have to go back and check, but it's not like 100,000 people planted fountain grass, and that's why it's all over. Could be not that much fountain grass that was planted.
Yeah.
One more question, Commissioner Friedman.
I think you answered the question, but as we've probably been reading in the paper, the city is considering an agreement with Grit that would actually bring the area that you mentioned, which was the Crescendo project, not currently owned by the city, but that could happen probably within months. So I would sort of echo the idea that once that becomes official city property, escrow and everything closes, it would be good to mobilize the public of saying, hey, we now own this property, let's all get together and clean it up, because I think we'd get a really good response rate from the public. It'll be absolutely in the news that the city has just acquired more than 100 acres between the two projects near the tramway and the Rimrock project, which may also have some of that, that we will work with those of us, or those of you who are involved with 1PS, to get 1PS folks, and various neighborhood people, involved in just, a Saturday, going out and cleaning up, some fountain grass.
Yes.
Have you guys spoken to 1PS about this?
I have not.
Well, they have.
Well, that could easily be arranged by contacting Kathy Cohn, who's the chairperson of 1PS, and arranging to have a special presentation.
I'd be willing to do that.
Okay.
Sure.
And I'll speak to her about it, too.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. A lot of really good information. And,
All right. Thank you. I do have, I have a copy of kind of a little short one-page article that I wrote, if I can distribute that, or is that something that has to wait for later? Okay. I'll just leave it here. You can take one and pass around. Okay. Thank you.
And Dan, could you send out the presentation to us?
I'm just going to give you guys a copy of this stuff.
Our next presentation is on sidewalks, and Don Barrett is going to make that presentation.
Okay. Actually, I'm going to speak very briefly on the previous presentation. I didn't know that version of fountain grass was bad, and it's everywhere all over Warm Sands. So I think that going to 1PS and having a conversation about that so that people would know about it would be very helpful.
Can I just say one thing? There are two kinds of fountain grass, and people have a tendency to say that purple fountain grass isn't invasive, but no one should plant fountain grass here.
Okay.
So all fountain grasses. So there are other alternatives.
Anyway, okay. I'm Don Barrett. I'm chair of the Warm Sands Neighborhood Organization. I came to actually speak about crosswalks more than sidewalks. I hope that's not a major problem. And my presentation is not nearly as colorful as that past presentation. But we have been concerned about pedestrian safety in Warm Sands for a number of years. There are concerns about crossing the street. There are concerns also about slowing the speed on Ramon because Ramon is our major street on the north side of the neighborhood. The neighborhood is bound by Ramon, Sunny Dunes, Indian Canyon, and Sunrise. We have about 1,000 people in the neighborhood. We are probably, again, I had to estimate on this, but I live in the neighborhood and around it enough to have a good sense of it. We're probably mostly over 55. We're increasingly becoming a year-round neighborhood. So we have here, actually the year-round is more like 10 months. A lot of people stay through into June and then disappear for a month or so. We have about 800 residents. We have 250 mobile homes. I know that number for sure. We have, my best guess is probably 300 apartments or duplexes. We have very few single-family homes. We're an area of affordable housing. We have a lot of people in our neighborhood still work. We do have a small number of families, and we also have nine resorts, and all of this affects our pedestrian safety as you're along the Ramon corridor between Sunrise and Indian Canyon. I realize that sustainability is more concerned about problems for the city in general. This is an example of the sorts of problems that occur in some neighborhoods. I brought here the two pieces of mapping to focus on two areas of concern. Can you do that? You did. That's good enough. I always confuse my east and west. So if I get off, that happens. The east end of Warm Sands, on the Ramon border, on the east end of Warm Sands, runs basically from Grenfell to Ramon. It's Grenfell to Sunrise. That's a typo. This is an area where the mobile home park, there's a large number of apartments in there, and everyone is walking over to the grocery stores at 525, I think it's 525, Sunrise, where Ralph's is and CVS and those sorts of things. We know that we have been approached in the past, Ramon Mobile Home Park has been approached in the past about the jaywalking between that and the grocery stores. A lot of that jaywalking comes from the entire neighborhood, from all those apartments through there. And actually, a lot of it also comes from people who work in that shopping center and are coming home. They live in that neighborhood. One of the reasons for the jaywalking is that the intersection at Sunrise and Ramon itself is a rather frightening intersection to use as a pedestrian. I have used it. I live about 200 feet, not 200, I live about 500 feet from Ralph's. I drive all the time because I'm not going to get a jaywalking ticket, and it's safer to drive than it is to go through that than it is to go through Sunrise and Ramon because of the number of people making turns and those sorts of things you can't see. You can't get the driver's eye to make sure they're not going to hit you. Whereas if you jaywalk, you can see them coming. You know where they are. So, I mean, I understand why people jaywalk. Why we can't have a pedestrian access, a lighted pedestrian crossing there, that's been a concern for many years. And we're always told that you can't do that. But obviously you can do it on Palm Canyon in the commercial district. So why we can't do it there is another question. And then the other section of Warm Sands that is a concern for pedestrian safety is the west end from around Caballeros up to Encilia. That has lots of resorts. And there's 9 resorts. I say there's 9, there may be more than that. There's a lot of foot traffic from there up to Arenas and downtown. There's a lot of residential foot traffic also through that area. So I can't, I don't have the resources to give you a count of the pedestrian traffic in that area, but it is high for both ends of that town. So these are examples of where pedestrian safety is a concern. I brought this to you, by the way, because John Goins, one of your commissioners, had mentioned that you were getting ready to be processing some, I think it's a grant related to pedestrian safety. And this is an example of pedestrian safety concerns within the city. You say we have about 1,000 people. We cross the street a lot. It's not safe. It's a relatively simple issue that seems solvable. It's solved in other parts of the town, but it isn't solved in our neighborhood. That's basically it.
Are there any questions for Don?
It's not as colorful as. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Don. And I just wanted to toss out, he and I had talked about this before, and recognizing that we have a subcommittee on walkability and pedestrian planning, that it might be something that could be discussed by that committee at some point in time. So it's good to get the information in front of us.
Okay, thank you. If you need more, my contact information is on the poster. Thank you.
Okay. The next item then is the meeting minutes. The minutes of the regular June 18th meeting were sent out last week and posted on Thursday. And at this point, is there a motion to accept the minutes? Thank you, Commissioner Baker. A second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Okay. All in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Okay. Minutes have been accepted. Now we move on to the recycling report.
Good evening. Welcome, new commissioner. We adopted, at the last meeting, we adopted a new reporting format, so I'll just read through it briefly. And it consists of 8 items. The first item is support for the solid waste franchise. So I've serviced the fire stations, police library, and other city facilities for any recycling that they may have. There's a beverage container grant expenditure report that's due in September, and that is for 2016, 2017. So how did we spend the money in those years? It's a very simple report. The last thing is I've been approached by Desert Arc asking for a proof of designation. What that is, it's a form approved by the state, and it allows Desert Arc to be one of the collectors of e-waste in our city, along with our waste hauler Palm Springs Disposal. And the reason that's important is because it allows us to control who collects e-waste, and then you don't get the people that with the signs that says e-waste collection at Lowe's from 8 to noon this Saturday, because we don't know what happens to that. Who knows where that material goes or what happens to it? I had an incident once several years ago where a group like that showed up and they were charging the residents $10 a piece to get rid of their hard drives. So that's what we want to limit. That's what we want to control. The second item is special events. Those are, the city offers 3 shredding and e-waste events every year where the public can bring in documents, banking documents and things like that, and they'll be shred on site, and they can also drop off e-waste at that collection and batteries and other things. We didn't have any of those in the past reporting period. Preparation, item 3 is the preparation of the annual report, collecting and collating data. There are still a couple. I got some information yesterday from San Bernardino County. There's a couple of people that I want to try and get more information from, and then I will be inputting the information, and it's due in August. Item 4 is tracking legislation. I don't know how familiar you are with SB 1326, but that's going to be a very important piece of legislation. It's going to be overarching. And there's quite a bit of consternation going back and forth between the state and some of the waste haulers. So I contacted Andrew Smith at the state, asking him if there had been any progress. He said it's been pretty quiet on their end. A lot of politicians, I suppose, are leaving for the summer, getting out of the city. I also had the opportunity to speak with our franchise waste hauler, Palm Springs Disposal, and I was told that the industry as a whole is planning to take a much more aggressive approach because they weren't contacted ahead of the legislation being written. So now they feel as though it's kind of being forced upon them. There's a lot of things about it that they don't like, so they're going to be pushing back with a little bit more force. Item
Gary, what
5.
was that bill number again?
SB 1326.
26.
So it's 26, not 1383?
83.
Yeah.
There's so many I get.
Yeah, I know.
Okay,
It's 1383. And so that has to do with organics management that will be changing here in the near future. So
1383, and what's the other one?
it's just 1383.
Yeah. Item 6 is perform other duties as requested. That usually consists of phone calls, emails, making contact with people, doing whatever it is that the city asked me to do. And item 7 is report the amount of recyclable materials taken to approved recycling facilities. And I'm very happy to announce for the first time that our battery collection has yielded fruit. There were 4 pickups in July 1st and 3rd, and it yielded 115 pounds. I understand there were 3 more today at the leisure center, the library, and one of the fire stations, as well as a 4th container in your office currently. So there's 4 more. So the average seems to be around 30 pounds per container, so I would comfortably say over 200 pounds collected so far. Desert Recycling did not submit its report yet, so I'll just report on SA Recycling, and 801 tons of green waste were taken to SA Recycling, which is not unusual in the summer because there's a lot of tree trimming and things like that. So that number's up a little bit. 61 tons of concrete and 110 tons of metal were all taken to SA Recycling. And the last item is reporting on the current legislation enforcement. That concerns the commercial recycling, mandatory commercial recycling. And I did not visit any businesses. We're sending out another round of letters. And so once those go out, I will contact them afterwards. I didn't see any sense in contacting them before the letters went out, so I'll just wait until after the letters go out. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
No questions for Gary? Thank you. Now we move on to old business. And the first item on the agenda is the leaf blower information campaign in compliance with the ban. Patrick?
All right. Just a quick update on leaf blower compliance. We have had a few inquiries from the press regarding the status of our compliance with our enforcement of the leaf blower ordinance. And so we reported that we've had about 60, for the month of June, which was the first month of enforcement, had about 67 complaints that were lodged with the code enforcement folks. We had about 15 or 16 of those that turned out to be false alarms. We had about 30 of them that they could not determine because they had either stopped using the blower by the time they got there or there was nobody there. And then there were about 9 citations issued. So we're continuing to monitor that and to see how we can improve the enforcement process. It's very difficult because it is so fast. They're in and out of there in about 5 or 10 minutes, and even though we may respond really quickly, they may be gone by the time we get there. So anyway, so we're trying to figure out ways to manage that and to especially identify those people who are persistent in their use of these the gas power blowers. So that is ongoing. Yes?
I will notice I was at work this week and the landscaping people were there, and the difference in noise between the gas and the electric was substantial.
Right.
I mean, I didn't think it was on. Is that right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's very different. And, I will say for the most part, we have gotten great feedback from people, both on the Gardner side and on the public side, where people are using them. And so it's really just down to what I think is just a handful of gardeners that are still using them.
An observation too from the user side, our gardener, I noticed on their last visit, he had plugged some device into one of our outdoor electrical outlets, and I wasn't sure, I really didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked him, it's like, is this a radio or anyway, it wasn't. It's he was plugging in to keep the electric backup. And I said, well, that's really interesting. I have no objection to you using my power to do that. I think it's wonderful. But what happens if you're in a location, say it's a summer home, and they've shut off their power and you don't have any way to keep your batteries going? And he said, in that case, I have to revert back to my gas blower.
Right.
He has no choice.
Right.
So just an interesting observation.
Well, I wouldn't say that he has no choice.
That's right.
He has a choice.
That's what
he
he
made
told
one.
me. That was his.
He
yeah.
made one. Yeah.
What is the difference in cost between the traditional and the electric?
Oh, yeah, microphone. So the question was, what's the difference in the cost between electric and a gas? And I would say it varies tremendously based on the model and the type. But I think that the prices are fairly equivalent. With the battery powered, though, you have the additional cost of a battery. So most of them usually come with a battery, but then you usually need to get an additional battery, and those can be about $500. So, yeah, but it's offset by the gas, of course, in the long term, but it is a higher upfront cost there. And we are having some conversations around potentially offering some rebates for batteries themselves. They were not part of the state rebate program for electric powered equipment. So anyway, so we're thinking about doing that. All right, battery recycling. Gary reported on our progress, about 240 pounds so far, and which equates to about 3,800 batteries have collected in just the first month and a couple of weeks. So we're hopeful that will continue, and we should have about a ton of batteries collected by the end of the year, I think.
And one additional location is the farmer's market on
That's right.
Saturdays. They now have a collection tube at the front desk.
Yeah.
That was at Megan's request.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to report that I did deliver some at-home collection boxes to True Value. So folks that go to True Value were asking about it, and so they asked us for about 50 of them, so we gave them to them so they can pick up your boxes at
So where
True
are they
Value as
available
well.
for the public?
What's that?
Where are they available for the?
They were the at-home collection boxes are available to the public at all of the collection stations. So all the community centers, the library, the city hall, and True Value. So, and we're taking some to the farmers market on
Right,
Saturday.
the ones in the back are to go to the farmer's market, but if you want to take a few before you leave, please do.
Yeah, we've got plenty.
And at the commission meetings.
Just thinking, would it be
And at commission
practical to like go to the hospitals or large employers and distribute them someplace like Desert Regional?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get hundreds of people at one space there.
Mm-hmm. That's a good idea. Yeah.
Yes, good idea, thanks.
Right. They can have them. They can take them home with them.
And the schools too.
Yeah. Yeah, the schools is a great idea, actually, because they can bring them home to their families. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So we'll continue to report on the progress on that. And other than that, I don't think I've had any questions or any much response from the public, except that they're really excited to have their at-home collection boxes. All right. So the next topic is the downtown trash and recycling receptacles analysis. So as you may recall, the downtown trash cans proposal was taken off of the council agenda about a month and a half ago, kicked back to the Sustainability Commission to do some more evaluation. And so we have done some additional work. And do you have my, click over here. Just a little update. So just a little update on what we've been doing since then. So just to give you a sense of our goal is we want to decide on a system of downtown trash and recycling containers that accommodate current and anticipated types and volumes of materials to help increase the city's waste diversion rates. And for the most part, maintenance is the driving force behind this. So we're really working closely with the maintenance staff to understand what their needs are and preferences are, and those will really drive the decision about the purchase. So we have conducted some outreach on this. We heard feedback at the Main Street meeting back in July. We did meet with maintenance. We met with the Main Street board, met with city manager, maintenance, and city council member just last week. And then we conducted a limited waste audit of part of the downtown area, which was very interesting. So just to recap, the existing containers are a mixture downtown. They are mostly the concrete square containers and the round containers that you see there. There's a few of the test containers that were purchased for La Plaza area. And then the rest of there are a few new ones in the grit development area. Most people agree they're not pretty. They're generally functional. They do have limited messaging on them, so there are a few containers that do have some recycling placards on them, but none of them really say trash, so there's fairly limited messaging on them. They've been pretty durable. They've got large openings, which is, on the one hand, is good. On the other hand, it's bad because some of the merchants are actually throwing their trash in there. They can throw their whole bag in there. And a lot of the reason that the openings are so big is because the tops have been stolen. So a lot of people stole the metal tops to recycle them and get the money. So, so that's a challenge that we face. And then they're repainted regularly, and the condition varies based on what we saw too. So, what was in the containers when we did our little survey analysis was a lot of food packaging and food waste. So for the most part, it was cups and food containers, a lot of ice cream containers, and a lot of beverage containers. So that was the primary thing that was in there. It was hard to tell how much recycling was in the containers because a lot of it gets picked through by those in need. They come through and collect it up for money. And so anyway, so that gives you a sense of what's in there. Again, plastic cups, paper cups were the primary things that were in there, and related foodware. So based on the information that we got from people and the things that we saw, these are some of the parameters that we've identified so far. It has to be at least 24 gallons. The inner liner has to be easy to replace and will hold a bag in place. They have to be resistant to the effect of sun and power washing. Grilled exteriors were preferred to defer graffiti. Other functional requirements including getting easy access for the maintenance crew and also non-removable tops, which continues to be a problem. So even if they're not metal, they get thrown into the street quite a bit apparently. So. Yes. Yeah. Oh, sure.
Yeah, we'll be making a motion. I think
Yeah.
that will be a good time to have discussion after the motion.
So in addition, design and placement. So what we have observed is that we need separate but paired recycling and trash containers where practicable and where needed to accommodate volume. So we don't necessarily think that every current trash container needs a paired recycling container. I think we need to think strategically about location. Recycling and trash containers should be visibly different and with messaging and color, and there should be consistency throughout the downtown. This is one of the maintenance preferences, is that all those containers be the same or similar so that they're really easy to go through and maintain throughout their life. And then we talked a little bit about signage, and certainly signage will be part of this effort, and so we're trying to get containers that would accommodate signage or messaging, that kind of thing. So that would be helpful to have. So those are the kinds of things that we found and that we're thinking about as we go forward with recommending any purchases. And then some observations that we had that were kind of interesting. One is there are a lot of materials in there that appear to be recyclable, but in fact are not. And so Lonnie is going to say a little bit more about that during her presentation, and Rob's going to go into a little bit more detail about what we saw. Container contents will be significantly impacted by the upcoming plastic foodware ordinance. Again, almost all of that stuff in there was as a result of the restaurants and the food service places that are along Main Street there, or along Palm Canyon. And then entrepreneurial recyclers' activities mean that containers may not matter much for CRV bottles and cans. So again, they are probably going to harvest that stuff no matter what we put it in. But if we have more recycling containers there, there's more of a chance that people are going to separate that stuff out. So hopefully there's less need for them to go through the trash, and maybe we can do a little bit better on the separation component. So those are the things that we saw, and just to give you a little bit of background before you guys talk about the motion that is before you. So,
Thank you for the background.
yeah.
As you see in the agenda, we do have a motion. We've been requested by City Manager David Reddy to make a recommendation about the types of trash and recycling containers that should be purchased by the city, authorized by the City Council. So I'm going to ask Co-Chair, Vice Chair McCann to read the motion, and then I'll ask for a second, and then there'll be time for more discussion.
The Sustainability Commission recommends that the city purchase standalone, not combined trash and recycling containers for the downtown, uptown business districts that can be paired when necessary to encourage effective recycling. The containers must meet the following requirements. Trash containers shall be gray and recycling containers shall be blue. They shall have non-removable tops. They shall be of similar design, but have appropriate openings and markings to differentiate trash and recycling. They shall be made of durable materials and be resistant to weather, graffiti, and power washing. And they shall have liners that hold bags and prevent them from slipping.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. So now we have time for discussion on the motion. Commissioner Miller.
On the end, the last
Microphone.
line, and they shall have liners.
Microphone.
Oh, sorry. And they shall have liners that hold bags and prevent them from slipping. What did you have in mind for liners? What does that mean, the word liners?
This came up in a discussion with maintenance, and basically what we're talking about is plastic liners within the containers themselves. And the example that was brought up was with those trial containers, the two that are down in the La Plaza area. It turns out that there are liners in there, but the bags easily slip into the liners. And so that anything after a while that is thrown into the container goes on top of the bag and just pushes the bag to the bottom of the liner. And so it's very difficult for the maintenance staff to empty the containers. They have to take the liners out, take a bag, and then turn the liners upside down to empty them into the bags. And so it turns out that the concrete containers that have been used have liners that seem to have a lip, and they hold the bags, and that's not a problem. So it's a very specific requirement, but all of these, this motion is very long, but all of these came out of several meetings that we had where we
That's
discussed
great, thanks for
parameters.
explaining what the liners are actually part of the can.
Yes.
Right.
Then, my question is, what are you considering for the bags?
We haven't really talked about that. I think it's the city buys and provides the bags for the containers.
Is there a way that, I mean, I think for me to vote for this, it would have to either eliminate bags or clarify what kind of bags we're talking about. Because we can't be talking about plastic bags, because that will be really, really mixing our messages. In other words, if we're going to have an educational piece, Palm Springs Campaign for Recycling 2019 this fall, one of the first things it's going to have is do not line your recycling with plastic bags.
Right, so just to clarify, you're talking about the recycling containers, not the trash containers.
Not the trash
Right,
containers.
okay.
But
So
the recycling
that's an
containers.
interesting point, and I think that there may be, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be part of this discussion.
Yes.
Okay.
Please do.
So I think there may be a way to deal with that outside of the bag going into the recycling. So I can work with maintenance on that question to deal with it on the other side, because one of the things I know that they've started doing is actually putting the recycling into blue bags so that they can keep them separate, so that they go into a separate place when they come back to the yard to be taken away. But But you raise a good point in that we should be probably emptying those bags before they get into the recycling stream.
So it's a
So,
system.
so that's a system question.
problem.
Yeah, that's a system problem. But I don't think there's any way that we wouldn't line a can with a bag to remove it and to maintain it. Otherwise, then that liner is just going to be a mess and probably, a really sticky
Well,
mess.
it's just, eventually, our recycling should not be a mess. But we're not there yet.
Right.
But if we
exactly.
put a big sign
Yeah.
that's to educate people there at our site and says, this thing about plastic bags, and there we have a plastic bag in it, it's a mixed message. So we're gonna I would like, first of all, you can have liners, that's a good idea, but maybe if we could, why do we have to say bags here? Could we say everything else, but don't say bags? Because something else is going to have to replace the plastic. Now, when we didn't, leaves were always a problem in the Northwest. We used paper. I'm not saying paper's a great substitute, but it's better than plastic bags. But I like the systemic solution there. I like that systemic, but I just think we have to be clear about that.
The construction of the sentence does not say that bags shall be used. It just merely says that it shall be able to hold a bag.
Good point.
And
Clarification.
And it's not plastic, it's not saying plastic bags. So, Lonnie, if I could respond to that at a higher level, that the big win here is earlier in this motion. It's that we got essentially J.R. Roberts and the city commissioners and Rady and all of these people to agree not to go for that bad container that they were coming into the meeting wanting. We've got them to go for paired, we've got them to go for differentiated. I think this is a detail that's important, but it shouldn't hold up us doing this recommendation compared to the win that we got.
Commissioner Garrett?
To your point about what these liners are made from, the concept of the liner is a great idea. It helps contain it, all of that. But using the plastic is a problem. There are other things, so I would say yes to the idea of the liner. That's great, but I would feel very uncomfortable about going forward with plastic liners.
Okay, and I'll just reiterate that that is an important detail, but it was not the big win for this.
Right.
Yeah, it was the containers themselves that was the topic of discussion.
And then the difference between the liners and the bags is that the liners should be there as long as the containers are.
permanent.
They're permanent. They won't be thrown away every time. And the suggestion about the bags is a very good one that we need to consider. But the liners are part of the containers.
And actually, there's potential for them to get metal ones too. So I've seen metal ones, I've seen plastic ones. Most of them are plastic, but I have seen metal ones too. So it's really up to maintenance to figure out how to do that, figure out the liner piece, I think.
And so one implicit thing that Commissioner McCann pointed out was that this recommendation, which was based upon our discussion with Dr. Reddy and J.R. Roberts and others, does eliminate that one dual-purpose container that has been used that we have been basically not happy with all along. But one other point there is that the concrete containers that are in the business district will be replaced. In our discussions with the Downtown Business Association, I think there was a lot of push for keeping those containers. The city maintenance staff really made a strong recommendation to replace them because a lot of them are in bad condition and they need to be painted quite frequently. And if they need to be sandblasted, they need to be picked up from the location and taken to the city yard and then sandblasted and painted, and that's very time-consuming and expensive. Those containers, I think, are, 10 or 20 years old?
20.
20 years old. So the recommendation was not to keep them, but to replace them. But the strategy will be, as we have described, where we will have separate recycling and trash containers. One thing that I would like to recommend or just throw out is that those concrete containers that are in good shape could be redeployed in other places, particularly in the new downtown parking garage. I think right now they only have cardboard trash containers, so that might be a location to use some of the concrete containers that are in good condition. So something to consider and discuss with the city staff as we go on. Is there any other discussion?
Yeah,
Commissioner
I'm
Cobb?
just wondering if this motion passes and was to go to council, can we include a couple of bulleted recommendations with it to just address that we'd like to see non-plastic liners and biodegradable bags if possible, so that, or at least, it doesn't have to be contained within the motion, but I share the other commissioners' concerns that we don't want it to be using single-use plastic bags to hold even our trash, not just the recycling.
But certainly when we forward the recommendation, if it passes to the appropriate city staff, we can add comments like that. That's a good suggestion. Any other discussion?
I just like to quickly reinforce that what Roy said, that's another aspect, another dimension that's a really big win for us, is that the city is eager and everyone's in agreement that they want to replace, and they want to replace with something consistent. And we've been pushing for consistent containers from the word go here. So it's good.
Commissioner Friedman?
Do any of these get financed through the recycling grants? Because I believe that, I guess through the glass, we can use some of those to, the glass recycling grant that we get from Cal Recycle, for use to buy some of these?
If they're specifically for bottle and can recycling, if they're marked that way, we can use that CRV fund, the Cal Recycle Fund.
So that fund is very small relative to the
Yes.
amount that's going to be purchased. So I think we'll reserve that money for signage and for some other stuff that's going to be related to this.
And we've been
to
using
go
that.
a little further.
And we've been using that fund for the
parks.
containers in the parks.
One more question on the, with the signage on the cans, because we have a lot of international people that travel here and we're basically bilingual, even without visitors, would that just be using graphics, pictographs, or would it be actual words?
I'll let the other commissioners, if they have a different view on this, but mine is that we should do both. That these signage should do pictographs and written instructions, and the written instructions should be bilingual.
Great.
Commissioner Coffey?
Yeah, along those same lines, I just wanted to comment that the signage is extremely important, because every month when you go through the San Francisco airport, you see they've got the composting, recycling, and trash. And people go there and stare at it, and stare at their plate, and stare at the cans, and it all goes into the trash.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, we don't want to make it too complicated, but I will say that the other component of this is that based on what we were seeing that was going into the containers, we're really focusing on bottles and cans, and at this point. That may change down the road, and with the kind of recommendations maybe that we have for the plastic foodware restrictions, that kind of thing. That may change down the road, but at least initially, I think we're focused mostly on bottles and cans. But
I'll just amend that a little bit.
Yeah.
The confusion is what people are putting in both recycle containers and in trash containers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that we will need very clear signage, not just for the bottle and cans focus on the recycle containers, but what you should be throwing into the trash containers. as
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because you'll probably go into this a little more. But I think people are under the assumption that a lot of those things are recyclable, and so they put them in the recycling, and so that's the other piece that Rob mentioned.
So there are a lot of things going on with regard to recycling, and I think
Yes.
this
They
overlap.
all come
and
together in the downtown
they're
trash
coming
cans.
together, yes. Any other discussion?
It sounds like you're saying that we vote on this or we don't vote on anything. And of course, I absolutely agree with the wonderful work that has been done to finally get it to this point. And by golly, we're going to do it, you know. But is there, don't we want to be pretty clear about it too? And I think if we can just say, and they shall have liners, period. Why do we even have to say they have to hold bags? Why do we have to be that specific?
And that's a good point. This really is quite specific, but these points came out of the discussion that we had with maintenance and the city council member Roberts and so forth.
The bags in particular?
Yes, specifically, yes.
Oh.
The slipping issue.
The slipping issue. And a lot of
The
this,
slipping issue, okay.
Yeah.
Of the, if it could be another container rather than the word bag, because when you say bag, it's plastic. And everybody's, or could you say container to hold get my thesaurus out?
By definition, bag does not equal plastic. I
Is
mean,
not by, that's true, okay, so,
It could be a
so then that
could be
is
a bamboo
specific
source,
enough,
and it could be a
because,
recyclable. I mean,
okay, it's just a misunderstood word then, maybe.
and just looking at the motion, if you look at the first part of it, that was really driven by the recommendations from the subcommittee, and the second part of the motion was driven by the recommendations from maintenance.
I see.
But maintenance is a very important part of this whole process.
Yeah.
Any other
And
discussion?
we'll put together the staff report too. I mean, we can tell the story too, so.
I'm good with it.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? So we have a motion and a second. Okay. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Okay. Motion carried, unanimous, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Big milestone.
Right, exactly. It's not done yet. Okay.
So now we move on to subcommittee and commissioner reports, and the first one is the Standing Subcommittee on Solar and Green Building. Commissioner Friedman.
Thank you, Chair Clark. Couple of things here. First, as Manager Talarico just mentioned, solar ordinance goes before the City Council next Wednesday, the 24th. It was approved unanimously by the Planning Commission on June 26th. Once the staff report, which I've essentially drafted along with the ordinance, are formally issued, no comment. Once those are officially put out on the agenda for the council meeting on Thursday night, I'll prepare public comment to indicate that our commission has approved the zoning ordinance, and make that to have it reviewed by Manager Talarico and make that public comment at the 24th. Next, as I mentioned last month, Commissioners Baker and Miller and I, the gang of three over here, we were named to the Community Advisory Committee of Desert Community Energy, and we had our orientation meeting last Thursday afternoon. One of the first things on our workload as the committee is that we will be reviewing responses to an RFP. The TCE/CVAG will issue shortly for consultant to develop an enhanced enrollment program for the SoCalGas and SCE low-income assistance programs. There are 18,000 customers currently signed up for in the three DCE cities, being Palm Springs, Palm Desert, and Cathedral City. DCE staff estimates that more than 6,000 customers are eligible for enrollment, not currently signed up. So it'll be a 2-year project to work with various stakeholders, religious organizations, faith, various NGOs, community organizations to get up the enrollment. We also learned at the meeting that as a result of Palm Springs adopting the 100% carbon-free product as the default option when DCE launches next year, probably in the fall, our annual greenhouse gas emissions will be reduced from 431,000 to 313,000 metric tons, which is more than a 25% reduction. The 1990 GHG level was approximately 432,000 metric tons, so we'll make good progress on the sustainability plan goal of reducing GHG emissions to 80% below 1990 levels by 2050. So with 30 years still to go, we'll have made, already approximately almost a third of what we need to go. You may recall that last year we had won the SolSmart Award for our solar areas. They have an innovation award, so I'll be preparing a submission, and perhaps we'll get another pat on the back from the National League of Cities there. We're working closely with CVAG and DVBA on the Energy Code training session. Tentatively, that will be the week of October 21st. We'll most likely have a presentation by the Energy Code ACE, which is a training program sponsored by SoCalGas, SCE, PG&E, and SDG&E. So essentially, that's covered by our electricity and gas bills. Hopefully, a very small to no hit on the commission budget because they do that training for free. And then we'll work with CVAG to go over to UCR and have them cover some of the costs. So, I think we have. Last year we didn't spend anything. It'll maybe be 500 to 1,000. If we get it to zero, even better. And then finally, Manager Tallarico is working with Commissioner Flanagan on the EV chargers, so I'll let him do an update on that.
So just quickly, we've been meeting with engineering to assess the various locations throughout the city where we were thinking of putting additional chargers. We've also been investigating fee-based charging systems, and so it's a little bit more complicated than just adding some chargers. So we're going to meet with SCE tomorrow to talk a little bit more about the power supply to some of these places. So that's basically where we're at with that. But I'm hoping this summer to really get all that nailed down and roll something out in the fall. So
Great. Any comments or questions on green building? Okay. Moving on to waste reduction.
Great, thanks. So you heard a little bit about the battery recycling program, the foodware plastic ordinance draft will be developed in the coming months. We'll be doing some outreach on that over the next couple of months. And then we had Rob and Lonnie were just going to give a quick update on some of the work that we've been doing on some of these other fronts. So I'll turn it over to Rob first on the public spaces side.
Okay, and I've just got a couple of slides. Well, we're getting them up here. Patrick's already mentioned that we did this survey of the downtown waste containers, both recycle where we could find them and the trash. Downtown, there were very few recycle containers compared to the number of trash containers. So then Roy and Patrick did the east side of a downtown area, and Gary and I did the west side. Gary and I did not collect information down to the level that Roy and Patrick did, and so Patrick and I got together and I took his data and ran some numbers on it, and I'm just going to show you what we discovered out of those numbers. So next. This, if you look at the categories here, this is the categories that I was able to get data and consolidate from both the east side and the west side. And I want to draw your attention. I've showed you this before, so I just want to draw your attention to two of the categories. The drink cups, you'll see that about 26 or 27% of the waste in these downtown containers were drink cups. And then the other one over to the right is miscellaneous plastic. We found a lot of miscellaneous plastic too. So luckily, Patrick and Roy broke down those two categories, and that's what I'm going to show you tonight is well, what was miscellaneous plastic and what kinds of drink cups are we talking about? And then I'll just have a couple of words to say about why I think that's important. So the next one, we broke the drink cups, and we're able to break them down into paper. So you'll see the first arrow. That was about 10% of the total, and this is now just trash containers. There's none of there weren't any recycled containers on the east side. So paper drink cups, about 10%. Plastic drink cups, of a value of greater than 2, these are just flat out non-recyclables. And they were, a significant amount too, 6 or 7%. Then I want to jump over just 2 over to get to the plastic food and foodware. This is utensils essentially, and straws and lids. We broke that out of the miscellaneous plastic, and you'll see you find that there's most of the miscellaneous plastic is actually that kind of foodware. So that's really useful to us because, again, we were talking earlier, Greg, about do we need good signage for the trash containers as well as the recycle? And I think this is an example of yes, we do. A lot of people think that this kind of stuff is recyclable, and it's not. So if we can get nice imagery up there and words that say, no, if you have any kind of utensils like this, put them in the trash containers, not the recycle. And that's kind of the take-home message from this, and I probably don't need to belabor it. But these other categories that we break down also are telling us what kinds of items that people are confused about, and right now they're just throwing them either into trash containers or recycle containers. Can we get the signage to clean up the confusion and get more of the right kind of stuff into the right container? So these data that we collected have been quite useful on that. Okay, one more slide where I think I've kind of already gone ahead and summarized what we're talking about. The paper drink cups, they're good in the sense that they're compostable probably, but they are definitely designed for trash, or they should be going in trash containers, not recycled containers. And so we need to get to work now on developing these icons for these different types of beverage containers. Add the plastic food utensils to the trash signage. Plastic straws should become part of the trash signage, not recycle. And then this last one is where things are starting to converge with the potential plastics ban that we've been talking about. So one of the things that our data suggest is that our ban should include a requirement to take plastic utensils and that sort of thing and make them compostable. Make retailers have to provide alternatives to plastic or replace the plastic ones with stuff that breaks down. And then we can have a consistent message. This stuff is for trash, it's not for recycle, and it's fine to throw it in the trash because then it will just biodegrade out in the landfills or whatever. So the data is giving us paths forward on where to go. Sandra, you mentioned other things, and I don't want to take any more time, but you are absolutely right about packaging. See a huge amount of stuff that's being thrown into containers is food packaging, and it's plastic packaging. And then I just identified a whole new area for that tonight. So yeah, we should be looking at this. We should be seeing if we can go back to manufacturers maybe and get them to change their packaging. And then one more thing is Patrick had a great idea at this meeting, which is the things that are most confusable, which are the drink cups. Maybe as part of our ordinance, we can get manufacturers to start putting something very, very specific, labels on the actual items that say this is recyclable or this is trash. The little numbers that are on the bottom of the plastics right now, nobody looks at those. I mean, they're really hard to see and they don't tell you anything. So we can do a lot better than that with having stickers or something on these things that say, because then we can get at it at the source. And if we can reinforce it with the signage, we're multiply hitting people with this is what you should be putting in where. And we do need to multiply hit people because of the inertia, and if people are out in public, they just don't really care about what they do with their disposables.
Okay. I know those materials and those products already exist. They're on the market.
They are.
They're affordable. They're dynamic companies. A lot of them are based here on the West Coast,
Mm-hmm.
all the way up to Canada. So we would be providing good business for U.S. businesses and not bringing in more plastic from Asia.
Yep.
So but it already exists, has great mouthfeel. You can get things that are made from rice, all kinds of natural products that will degrade, but they have a good mouthfeel, and it doesn't have that and they actually function, so you don't have like a funky fork that you're pretending to eat with. They actually work, but they're, or even like the little wooden paddles, old-fashioned for ice cream and things like that. It's fun, it biodegrades, and it doesn't have a bad taste. So they already exist. So maybe providing a list of these providers to the companies so they can browse and make their own decisions. But I think putting that recyclable graphic, embossed usually, but in a place where you're going to notice it,
Where you'll
make
see
it
it.
more attractive and fun, and get it there, because otherwise it's not, if it's hidden, it's not achieving anything.
No,
So
nothing.
what's the point? It's like the collapsing Sanet liners in the bags. Like, what's the point? So it does exist, and they're better. They look good, and it makes the takeout more fun. It's not just styrofoam and that does affect the quality of your food. And that being said, with the food particularly, the receipts, the thermal heat receipts that they use in most of the cash registers in food restaurants, but takeout. And they'll even put it on the plates, before they take it to the process when that tape comes out is so toxic. So the cashier, anybody who's handling it, the wait staff, people taking it home for their receipts, they're being exposed to some very dangerous chemicals. The difference is that you can get perfectly non-toxic that work in the same cash registers. Non-toxic, it's made in Wisconsin, it costs the same, and it's food, and it's healthy. But it's shocking to me, I live right near John's, I go there a lot, and I see it all the time, where they'll take the receipt, she's handling the receipts and the food, and she puts it right on top of the food. My gosh. And here's this young woman at the cashiering all day with receipts. What's going to happen to her health? So most people aren't aware of that, but it's a simple thing. You don't have to get new machinery and new cash registers. It's just the tape that you have to replace anyway. So why not get the good stuff from Wisconsin?
All right, and so Lonnie was just going to provide us with a brief update on some of the information that we're trying to synthesize from a lot of these places, like the trip to the materials recovery facility and some of the things we're seeing in other avenues. So, Lonnie, you want to talk about some of that?
While we're getting my slide up. This was the star of Toy Story 4. This is Sporky. So it's not compostable, but there are a lot of issues with compostables. But if the retail industry were to hand these out, they could just wash them off. That happens to be from Riverside Waste. Anyway, they could wash them off. You got it on a lot faster than I did. Anyway, so, it's about reusing, because there are issues with the compostables. Anyway, I don't want to preach too much to the choir here, but there's my slide. And to make you all feel a lot better right at the outset, the lower three categories I'm not even going to talk to, because they're kind of obvious. It's just you want to debate a little bit about what goes where in terms of our signage and whatnot. It's not worth the time right now tonight to talk about them. But I did want to talk about the other four, and this as a result of my little excursion to Starbucks. These are small items. There's the problem with small items, and that there's those are examples of them, and I'll explain that red mesh in just a minute. Why can't you put that in recycling? Very good. But the main reason for that one is because there's essentially no market for it, number one. And number two, they jam up the conveyor belts on the optical sorters in a bad way. So you throw them in the garbage. Most people would, yeah, see? I mean, So just right there, we could make our recycling process better. Okay, then the famous paper beverage container. This is hot or cold. There's every indication this is not recyclable. When I went into Starbucks to dig through their garbage, they were helping me because everybody that works in Starbucks knows nothing that they give to anybody is recyclable. And I mean, it's a joke, really. And they have these fabulous containers. And by the way, in terms of developing new containers, Starbucks joined with, what, was Circle K, I think, 3 years ago to find a better recyclable beverage container. They've never found one. But, okay, so this is pretty cleaned up, you know. I mean, I did clean it up. It was this guy, Dennis, but he had a triple cream, heavy cream latte with stevia. Anyway, so, but you can see there's contamination in this, the potential, but the main thing with this is the plastic lining. And it's in all of it looks like pure paper, but no, there's plastic lining in all of them. Plus the biohazard, and that's where you get, you know, other people's contamination in there too, and it goes into the recycling.
Yeah.
So, okay, plastic bags. All right, so any size, shape, doesn't matter what kind it is. I haven't brought one. This is pretty cool. I like that bag, and I'm going to use it for a long time because it's going to be on this planet for a long time. It's strong plastic, but we can't put them in our recycling cans, and you know why? They're called tanglers. And what they do is they get jammed again in the conveyor belts in a different way than the small items do, but they still get jammed nevertheless. And when you see these, like at Edom Hill, if you go there, you see everything comes in a plastic bag. And when we went and we looked at in the city dump area behind, you know, City Hall here, every big, humongous black plastic bags filled with stuff. And they end up out in Southeast Asia, but that's another story. Anyway, so why can't they be used? They're called tanglers. They jam the conveyor belts. And we have found no evidence whatsoever that they are recycled. The number one finding on beaches or in the ocean are cigarette butts. The number 5 is bags, plastic bags. Deadly to ocean-going animals, and like other plastics, not biodegradable, so they're going to be around for a long time. So be sure and don't line your plastic bag, your recyclable container with a plastic bag. You can line your kitchen container with a plastic bag, but then when you take your recycling out, just dump it in. And that's what they tell us to do at BSDS. Okay, so if you get bags like this, which actually I kind of like to get bags like this now because I don't have any more bags like this and they come in handy. You reuse them. But I don't want to preach to the choir. So, non-block styrene, brand name Styrofoam. This plastic resin is number 6. And it is very frequently, you saw I passed around that other, where did it go? Okay, yeah. In food service containers. They can also come as a packing material called peanuts or ghost poop, depending on what part of the region you're from. But they're these little, you know what I'm talking about. They lack market value and should not be put in recycling bins. The block polystyrene, though, does apparently have a value, although I did not find it on this list. And this is a Burtec MRF list. I'll pass it over in that direction. So I'm really wondering what goes on with that. The problem with the block polystyrene that we all get if we go and buy a television set or a lamp is you have this big, humongous thing. What are you going to do with it? And a lot of people put it in their recycling thinking, well, yeah, they'll melt it down as plastic. But it turns out that our MRF guy, Richard, said that they did recycle them. But the problem with this product doesn't have to do with garbage, it has to do with the earth and the environment. Because when it's heated, I mean, we've all known for years, decades, that if you heat your take-home food in a polystyrene container, that the heat releases toxins from the styrene. Well, the same thing happens when you produce polystyrene, and the same thing happens when you recycle polystyrene. So why are we using polystyrene? But the good news is that if you go back to some of the retail places that where you bought your television set, like Costco, I asked them specifically this weekend, and Lamps Plus, but I'm sure there are other ones, but of course you'd have to buy locally, you know, you wouldn't get it probably with Amazon. Or maybe you could. I don't know. I haven't checked that out. But you can return it. That's it. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner Baker.
The one thing is, how do we educate people? Like, I only learned from you back during the convention about certain things that should not go into the recycling bin. So would it be a better approach to start with our school kids and work on recycling programs with them? Because I remember during the 70s when the energy crisis, I was always the one nagging my parents about turning off the lights, not letting the water run when you brush your teeth, because that's what they taught us at school.
Yeah, I agree 100% on that. And in fact, I think part of our program should be a Masters in Recycling educational program for adults and children. And as a matter of fact, you guys are on the front line. The reason why we present this to you is so that you can go out and tell people now. It's not too, I mean, is that okay? It's not too soon for this stuff, right? We have a number of things. We have a number of things that are not mentioned here. And that's because we're still doing the research. But I agree with you. I think the schools, what a great place.
Commissioner Friedman.
I'm as guilty as anybody about what I think the article that you circulated is aspirational recycling. This really should be recyclable. It's not, so thank you very much. It's kind of scary. The road to hell, as they say, is paved with good intentions, so that's part of it. It would be useful to work with PSDS to get some inserts or stuff on their website so that people actually know you may think this is recyclable, but actually it's not, so it goes in the trash. The downtown, all of the signage downtown is great for our visitors and when we're downtown, but so many of these decisions are actually like literally in our kitchens, and we're trying to figure out where, you know, I have 2 bins and which bin does it go into, and I often get that wrong. So any education, this is great, but I still need more education.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. We all do.
With some of the packaging, just for the hot beverage drink, for example, you can get on the market now, and it's affordable, maybe actually less depending on volume. But with those drinks that they're 100% paper, they don't leak. They're going to hold up to a hot beverage, you know, sitting on your lap for a while, and they're not plasticized or waxed in any way. And that exists. The other thing, which is a great...
Wait a second. Have you seen them? Have you gone to a store and found them? Because I haven't. Yeah. And I've looked. When you find one, please let me know.
The other thing, which is great for inventory space and time, is it's just better design. The caps that would go on they have a universal one now, so instead of the retailer having to provide a small, medium, large, and everything else, and then maybe a straw, it's actually a universal top that has a straw sippy kind of on it, but it fits on each size. So they buy one top, they display one top, so it's better for them and more efficient. But it doesn't have the other parts into it, and it eliminates the straw, be it plastic or paper.
I think these are just fabulous ideas, but it doesn't, I'm finding it's a little disappointing that things don't move quite as quickly as I'd like them to.
The
And
other
if we
thing,
can get an upgraded recycling program out this fall
fantastic.
with signage, I think we can all pat ourselves on the back. And I'd love to have you on the committee.
The other thing I wanted to mention was, as far as a sturdy, reusable, what had been plastic bags, somebody brought it to me recently, said, I think you should see this. JCPenney's is doing that type of bag, but it's made out of Pellon. So it's soft, it's
The compostables, there's a lot of issues with those. Many
well, and
stores
it's coming
don't-
from, but the idea that they're using basically a paper product
I see what you mean.
as a non-woven material, but it's replacing their plastic. It's nice and soft. It takes graphic printing great, and it was nice enough that she saved it. And then she thought, I should go show this to Sandra. She'd be interested. I was very impressed. And typically, JCPenney's is not a leader in progressive retail packaging, but it was a great idea. I'll bring it in. It's like
Sure.
you like it, and it feels good in your hand, and you can use it.
We are really being methodical about checking everything out before we print signs. And this is only for 1 year that these signs are going to be printed for, because things are going to change. But we're really, and thanks to my colleague Patrick here, who is, put the reins on me several times. No, we got to check this out. And I appreciate that. And that's why this list is as short as it is.
Right. I will just say that we are, I would just reiterate that we're trying to just be very careful about this, not only because it's important to get it right as we can, but also because it has a lot of policy implications and program implications. So the minute that we put something on this list to say, don't recycle this, it has an impact on what we are required to report to the state. And so that connection has to be made very carefully and in conjunction with PSDS. So there's lots of moving parts to this, and it's very complicated, and it has to be done quickly because things are changing very fast. So again, we've got all these things sort of coming together, and again, it just has a lot of components to it. So we're trying to be as precise as we can be, given the information that we have, but also try to move forward in a way that's helpful and fairly quick. So.
That's an important comment. Thank you. So let's now move on to walkability and pedestrian planning.
So the only update I have for folks is that I've been trying to reach out to our program manager at SCAG, and I have not heard back from him since I gave him the updated scope of work. So nothing to report on that front. But we have actually gotten some good feedback on some places that we need to think about in terms of improving, both from Bob Barrett, who was here before, but also in the Tockwitz Creek Community Committee, or I don't know what they're called. They also brought up a couple of examples of places that were routes to schools that they want improved too. So anyways, we're getting stuff bits and bits.
That's good, getting more information. Good. Okay. Then the next subcommittee is World Environment Day, and we have a couple of specific bullets here in the agenda, things that we brought up the last time, and basically there had been a recommendation to change from an ad hoc subcommittee to a standing subcommittee. So the reference to going from 2 to 3 that we heard earlier is about adding World Environment Day as a standing subcommittee. At this point, we also would ask if any of the commissioners are interested in joining that committee, and when the meeting should start, like not a few months before World Environment Day, but perhaps earlier. So those are the reasons for the bullets, and I'll turn it over to Commissioner Futterman to add to the discussion.
I think I can speak for T, who's not here, and Greg. We welcome you to join us if we're going forward, and hopefully starting in September. So we'll be going dark next month.
So if we do want to change to a standing subcommittee, we'll need a motion.
Ah.
No? No? We don't know.
I don't know.
Before, I think the chair has just stated that they're making a standing subcommittee.
Well, the consensus before seemed to be that we should change it to a standing subcommittee, so if it can,
I think you can do it as chair.
okay, so we will then change ad hoc subcommittee on World Environment Day to standing subcommittee on World Environment Day. And if anybody else is interested in participating, please notify Jennifer. But as she said, the first meeting will be in September. She'll announce that. Great.
I would think that we'd have 4 standing subcommittees, because isn't the bicycle subcommittee also, I mean, that's been meeting for a long time. And
We have it listed as an ad hoc subcommittee. So I think it's,
And I think we talked about this also, is that there's only one person
Yes.
on that committee. So unless there's another one, it's almost like he's a liaison to the
right.
the public group.
Yeah, and for all practical purposes, that's really how it's operating.
But didn't we hear earlier that volunteers on committees are subject to the Brown Act if it's a,
Go ahead.
If there's only one person, there's no quorum, so it's just you can't talk to yourself.
Okay.
no, but there are other members on that
unless you're
committee
too
that
old.
aren't on the commission.
Yeah, but the issue is that under the Supreme Court decision, Joyner against the City of Sebastopol, if you have a committee that consists of a commissioner and members of the public, through the exception to the exception, it's subject to the Brown Act. But I think what's happening is that that's not what they are, because essentially it is a liaison. There is a committee of members of the public, and then there's a liaison, but they're not jointly meeting. If they jointly met, then that would have to be Brown Act notified. But if it's essentially they meet and then one person or whatever reports back and there's a liaison, then I think you can say is that you're just liaison to a group of citizens. But it's not a committee that's actually meeting. Very complicated, but thank you, the Brown Act.
Yeah, we didn't. I'm sorry. One of the bullets under the film ad hoc World Environment Day subcommittee was to see if there were any additional members. So I wasn't sure if there were any additional members that wanted to join that, or and I think you can only have one more. So without going over the limit.
Oh, the quorum.
Oh, there's only 3.
There's
right.
3 now, but if you can have
5.
You can have 4.
There's 11.
Okay, 5. Five. You can have 5.
Well, if anybody does want to participate, please let Jennifer know. Okay.
And you should feel free to join any of the other committees too, whenever you're ready to do that.
That being said, could I just mention here,
As I started here, I was invited to join the planning committee for Pride. So we had our first meeting last week, and it was interesting because they were talking about the giveaways and the plastic candies and all of that sort of thing. So we were thinking about taking a new approach and not, so the street isn't littered with crushed candy and, kids don't have rotten teeth and stuff like that. So, but a better way, I mean, maybe even using flowers or something like that as you walk down the street instead of giving out junk beads and plastic wrapped candy. So I would be, I guess, interfacing between here and there. So, but the Pride Committee was very open to any ideas in keeping Pride sustainable as well as family friendly, so.
That's great. Okay, the next subcommittee is Ad hoc Subcommittee on Bicycle Routes and Cycling. Commissioner Flanagan is not here, so no report. Subcommittee on Night Sky. Vice Chair McCann, do you have anything to report there?
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Bighorn Sheep Habitat Protection. I know Patrick has something to report there.
I'm really excited to report something. So we did get signs. So these are going to be posted at the trailheads. I think 6 or 7 of them, and so those will probably go up in the next couple of weeks. I'm putting together the work order right now, but these were we got these through CVAG, and they're the ones that provide them for the folks all throughout the valley. So these are consistent with what the signs are elsewhere, and I'm working with the Parks and Rec Commission to make sure that that goes through them as well.
So our second major milestone for the evening.
Yes, exactly.
So, thank you.
Could I add something about the Bighorn sheep?
Yes,
At this
sure.
point? I'm also very pleased to report that there is a press conference that's been scheduled for Thursday morning at 9 a.m. at the head of Oswego Canyon, where the Save Oswego Canyon head is going to be giving a press conference and reporting significant development that they have put together enough pledges for funding that we can go forward this fall with a fundraising campaign. The discrepancy now is down to $1 million that they need to raise from the public in order to come up with enough money to pay the developers to save Oswego Canyon from development and save the bighorn sheep that are there. So anybody who would like to show up at 9 a.m. at the head of Oswego Canyon, I'll be there, and I invite you all.
Thank you. That's great news. Okay. The next subcommittee, or actually it's it's wellness, the next item on the agenda. Commissioner Baker.
Yes, so I spoke with Richard Noble again on his aspirations for the city to become green. So there's still a lot of work to do. He's trying to make things concrete. He's just a lot of 10,000 feet ideas. And so I'm trying to corral something down to a measurable, definable objective for the fall.
So nothing planned for the next few months. Okay. One thing I did want to ask you, Patrick brought up earlier that there's been a request about alternatives to Roundup and other chemicals, and I was at the city council meeting when Councilmember Coors brought that up, and I was trying to think about how we might approach that, and I wanted to ask if that's something that you might want to look into. Okay, great, thank you.
With the Roundup issue, which I see as a major issue globally, I'm shocked at the TV commercials. They're obviously designed, they're animated, they're very sunny and happy and friendly, like they're being marketed to children. I think it's absolutely sinister and frightening. And to look at that commercial and to listen to that, and for a lot of people, that's the only information they're going to be getting are those happy, hello Roundup, my friend, commercials. And I was also shocked because I was poisoned in industrial poisoning, which turned my life upside down in '97. But I was waiting. I rarely go into Home Depot, but I had gone with a friend to pick up some things. We were waiting in line. I started feeling really dizzy. I turned around. There was a giant display of Roundup behind me. I had to leave and go out in the parking lot right then, or I was going to faint. It does, it smells. It's not contained in and it's so dangerous. It's not just poison. It's much worse than just poison. So I think for me, I think it should just be illegal everywhere. It shouldn't be allowed to be manufactured, and it should not be used here in Palm Springs, period.
Okay, so there'll be some activity on that. Thank you. And finally, water. Commissioner Friedman.
Thank you, Chair Clark. 2 reportable items from this morning's DWA board meeting. First, the DWA board completed its process for establishing elections by division. Starting in 2020, there will be 2 divisions in the Desert Hot Springs area, east of Highway 62, one division that goes from Highway 62 to north and northwest Palm Springs, including Little Tuscany, Vista Las Palmas, and Old Las Palmas, one division for central and southwest Palm Springs, and then finally one for east and southeast Palm Springs, and the Cathedral City Cove, which is in the DWA service district. Service area. And then second is that more great news on water conservation. DWA and its customers achieved a 22.3% reduction in potable water production in June compared with the same month in 2013, which is the state's benchmark year. Cumulative savings over the last 12 months period is 18.1% from the benchmark, and the cumulative savings beginning in June 2016, when DWA put its 10 to 13% target in place, is 17.6%, so way over the target. We continue our streak of consuming less water each month than in 2018, so let's keep it up.
Thank you. Okay. Commission.
Outreach is not on there. I didn't notice.
Pardon me?
Before. Outreach is not on there.
We talked about that last month, and I think we decided that since outreach was implicit in a lot of the subcommittee activity, that we would not have it as a separate subcommittee or activity. If there's something that you want to bring up, please do. And if that change is inappropriate, we can go back to having a regular report.
I just wanted to share with you all this amazing resource that some of you may know that I'm one of the secretaries for the Environmental Education Collaborative. It's to support Riverside and San Bernardino counties, and I can get copies of these for everyone if you want, but this is a really comprehensive guide to environmental education and environmental learning resources, so I thought you'd want to check it out.
That's great, thank you. And things like this we can also include with commissioner comments as well. So, thank you. So the final item on the agenda is commissioner comments and upcoming agenda development. Remembering that our next meeting is going to be in September, not in August, unless everybody here decides that they want to meet in August.
Do not want to meet in August, but I do have an agenda item for September pursuant to section 2.06020 of the Palm Springs Municipal Code. We should have had elections from chair and vice chair today, given that Commissioner Garrett has just joined us and 3 commissioners are absent. Entirely appropriate to defer that to September, but I would appreciate if that could be added to the agenda for September so that we're compliant with the municipal code.
Yes, and we have discussed that, and the reason being not having the election today is because we're giving Commissioner Garrett a chance to sit through a whole meeting, and we do have others that are absent, so we will have it on the agenda for September. So continuing, we'll go this way around the room, continuing with around the table. Commissioner Miller?
I'm sorry?
Comments and...
No, I have none. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Garrett?
No comments.
Okay. Nothing.
No comment.
Okay. Commissioner Baker, okay. So that was easy. So the next item then is adjournment. Our next meeting will be on September 17th. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Commissioner Gothia, thank you. Second, Commissioner Baker. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.